They thought you'd always be there reacting, arguing, desperately trying to explain yourself, but then you went silent. Not the silence of surrender, but a silence that terrifies them. A silence that is cold, calm, and final. A silence that severs the last thread of control they had over you. And that's when their nightmare truly begins. You see, narcissists and their loyal flying monkeys don't fear what you think they do. They're not afraid of your anger. They're not afraid of your tears. They fear one thing above all: that you'll change, that you'll see through them, that you'll expose them, that you'll build a life where they are no longer the center of your world. In today's video, I'm going to reveal 10 things that absolutely terrify narcissists and flying monkeys when you do them. Things that may seem small to others, but to them, they're signs that you're no longer their puppet. From not replying to their texts to speaking your truth in public, every one of your actions is a blow to the false reality they tried to force you to live in. And the best part, they can't stop you, because you've awakened. You're not going back. You don't need them anymore. If you're on a healing journey, make sure to subscribe and watch this video until the end, because today, you won't just understand the narcissist, you'll learn how to make them fear you for life. 1. The fear of being confronted with the truth. A narcissist doesn't fear your yelling. They don't fear your outbursts because they've learned how to manipulate that. But there is one thing that truly makes them tremble in silence when you look them straight in the eye and speak the truth. They fear confrontation. They fear the moment you recall every detail, every time they said one thing and did another. They fear you calling them out, not with rage, but with evidence. They fear your clarity, because when you become clear-eyed, you're no longer their supply. You're no longer finding excuses to forgive the unforgivable. You're no longer trying to understand them. You simply begin to see them for who they truly are: manipulative, deceitful, and incapable of accountability. A narcissist survives by twisting reality. They gaslight you so that you doubt your own memory. They'll say, "I never said that. You're overreacting," or "I was just joking," all designed to make you feel like the problem. But when you begin to remember, when you start learning about gaslighting, psychological abuse, and narcissistic personality disorder, the game starts to crumble. There's nothing more terrifying to them than someone they used to control who is now informed and fearless. You no longer say sorry when you've done nothing wrong. You no longer feel guilty for asking questions. And when you say, "I know what you're doing and I no longer accept it," that's when they lose their greatest weapon, the confusion they planted in your mind. 2. The fear of your silence. You might think silence is weakness, but to a narcissist, your silence is the most powerful statement you could ever make. It's not your screams that shake them. It's not the long emotional texts. It's your absence, your stillness, your refusal to react. Why? Because narcissists feed on your reactions. Every tear, every argument, every emotional outburst to them, it's proof they still have power over you. They don't care that you're in pain. They only care that they still occupy space in your mind. But when you choose silence, when you stop responding, when you stop reacting, when you walk away from the same old games that once pulled you in, you've cut off their narcissistic supply, and that makes them quietly unravel. Your silence is not surrender. It's an intentional withdrawal. It's a declaration of independence. It means you've stopped trying to save someone who never wanted to be saved. It means you've let go of the fantasy that this time will be different. It means you no longer need to earn someone's validation to feel worthy. Silence also forces them to face themselves. When you're no longer there to reflect, to blame, to absorb their chaos, they're left with the echoes of their own emptiness. And that's something a narcissist cannot bear. They are terrified of the void within them, and your silence puts a mirror right in front of it. Your silence strips away their performance. No more script. No more audience. No more stage for them to play the victim. And in that emptiness, they become invisible, the thing they hate most. You don't have to scream insults. You don't need to prove they were wrong. All you have to do is not respond. No justifications, no clarifications. no long-winded texts explaining your side. And that is what terrifies them. What's worse is when your silence isn't just quiet, it's peaceful. When you're glowing, smiling, thriving. That kind of silence isn't emptiness, it's power. It's a loud, undeniable declaration that they no longer have any power over you. They'll do anything to break that silence. They'll accidentally text you, send an old picture, bring up a nostalgic memory. They'll pretend to have changed. They'll play the reformed victim. Don't fall for it. Because when you speak not with words but with firm, grounded silence, you've taken back the power. You've shifted from the manipulated to the one in control. And that is what a narcissist fears most, a silent you who stands firm. You're no longer stirred, no longer chasing, no longer explaining. You've simply and completely walked away. 3. The fear of you setting boundaries. Narcissists hate boundaries, not because they don't understand them, but because they disrespect them. In their world, everything must revolve around their needs, their emotions, their control. So when you dare to set a boundary, it's seen as an act of rebellion they cannot tolerate. Boundaries to a healthy person are a way to protect oneself and build mutual respect. But to a narcissist, every boundary is a threat, a sign that you're no longer willing to submit. They're used to you always saying yes, always forgiving, always staying. They're used to the version of you that was pliable, apologetic, and easy to guilt trip. But one day you say no. You don't reply at 2 a.m. You don't accept insults followed by shallow apologies. You don't let them walk back in after walking out 100 times. You're no longer the soft landing for their chaos. And that terrifies them. Because you're doing something they never wanted you to do. You're putting yourself first. You no longer let them define your worth. You no longer allow them to drift in and out of your life like an unpredictable storm. You're teaching them without words that you are no longer their possession. Every time you hold that boundary, they feel their control slipping. They will test that line with sweet words, with guilt, with rage, with tears. But if you stand firm, they begin to wither in the shadows because they know you're no longer playing by their rules. And the most terrifying part, when you set boundaries without explaining, when you no longer feel the need to justify or defend yourself, you simply know what you need and you protect it. Boundaries are freedom. And when you start living in that freedom, the narcissist is forced to face a bitter truth. They no longer own you. They no longer define you. They no longer command your emotions or your life. And that is their undeniable fear, your existence beyond their control. 4. The fear that you'll see through their game. Nothing terrifies a narcissist more than the moment you begin to realize that everything you went through wasn't passionate love or misunderstandings or their bad temper as they claimed. It was a deliberate, calculated strategy designed to control you, keep you small, and make you doubt yourself. Narcissists manipulate in subtle, insidious ways. It starts with praise, admiration, putting you on a pedestal. You feel chosen, special. But once they have your trust, once you give them your heart, the narrative shifts. They begin to distort reality. You start wondering if you're being too sensitive, if your memory is failing you, if maybe you're overreacting. Gaslighting is one of their most dangerous tools, and what frightens them most is when you start to recognize it. When you do your research, when you read books, when you watch videos like this one and finally say, "No, I'm not crazy, I'm being manipulated." Once your eyes are open, their tricks no longer work. They'll scramble to regain control, play the victim cry, make promises, blame you. But now you see the pattern. You no longer try to please them. You no longer feel guilty for having boundaries. You start choosing yourself instead of trying to save them. And that is their worst nightmare. Not that you leave, but that you leave with awareness. You stop equating love with suffering. You stop believing you have to change to be loved. You realize that true love never makes you feel small, guilty, or not good enough. You become someone they cannot control, not because you fight them with rage, but because you no longer believe them. No more believing their promises. No more falling for the fake remorse. No more clinging to hope that they'll be different next time. And that breaks them. Because once the mask no longer works, they have nothing left. They live off scripts, and when you stop playing your role, they lose their entire act. 5. The fear that you're happy without them. Nothing wounds a narcissist's ego more than seeing you happy without them. Because to them, you were never a person, you were a reflection, a mirror designed to spotlight them, to admire, obey, and fuel their empty sense of self. They never loved you. They loved the power they once had over you. When you walk away, they don't just lose a partner or a relative, they lose a mirror. A mirror that once reflected power, charm, and importance they believed they possessed. But when you leave, and not just leave, but glow, grow, and thrive, it shatters their illusion completely. Narcissists live in a distorted world where they are the center of the universe, and you are a planet orbiting them. So when you smile without them, when you blossom, evolve, and find joy, it doesn't just unsettle them. It makes them feel invisible, irrelevant, and replaceable. They believed you'd collapse without them. They believed no one else would tolerate you, understand you, or love you the way they did. But you prove the opposite. You are calmer, more radiant, more successful, more independent. And what terrifies them the most, you don't miss them. They fear you falling in love again. They fear you being truly loved by someone kind. They fear you finding someone who cherishes everything they once ridiculed, your gentleness, your honesty, your sensitive soul. They don't fear your hatred, they fear your forgetfulness. Because hate is still a bond. But forgetting means true freedom. The happier you are, the smaller they feel. The more you become your full self, the more they realize their influence was always an illusion. Your happiness is something they cannot tolerate because they didn't create it. They can't control it, and they are no longer a part of it. And that is what terrifies them the most. You're living a life where they no longer have a role, not even a name in the credits. 6. They fear you no longer seek their validation. There's one thing a narcissist always counts on, the belief that you need them to feel worthy. They build relationships based on emotional dependence, shaping how you see yourself, how you feel about your worth, and how you define your value. They make you believe that only they can see you, understand you, or allow you to feel like you're enough. As long as you depend on their approval, they hold power. They offer compliments in drops only to snatch them back with criticism. They lift you up one moment, then tear you down the next. It's all to keep you returning, craving their nod of approval like a child begging for recognition from a cold parent. But one day something shifts. You start asking, why do I need them to validate me? Why do they get to decide if I'm good enough or not? And you begin to do the one thing they fear the most, you validate yourself. When you stop asking for their opinion, when you wear what you love without needing their praise, when you do good without needing them to see, when you feel proud, peaceful, and whole without a single word of approval from them, that's when their control crumbles. Narcissists cannot stand the idea of you being free in your own sense of self-worth, because they can't manipulate someone who no longer doubts themselves. They can't control someone who knows their worth without needing permission. When you stop seeking agreement, you become untouchable. No insult can crush you. No silent treatment can shake you. No rejection can convince you you're unworthy. You know your value comes not from someone's gaze, but from the respect you give yourself. And that is what terrifies them. Not because you hate them, but because you no longer need them. 7. They fear you discovering your true worth. Nothing scares a narcissist more than someone they once manipulated waking up and realizing their true worth. Throughout your relationship, they did everything they could to make you forget who you are. They made you question your abilities, downplay your accomplishments, and believe that you were never good enough without them by your side. They planted seeds of doubt like, if I'm really good, why don't they respect me? Am I just too sensitive? Am I even lovable? Narcissists know this. A person who doesn't know their worth is the easiest to control, because that person will keep trying to prove themselves, keep trying to please, keep fearing abandonment. But then something shifts. You start reading, learning, healing. You begin to realize that their criticisms weren't the truth, that the reason your best was never enough wasn't because of your flaws, but because they never intended to give you enough. You stop looking back with guilt and begin to see the past with clarity. And then one day, you look in the mirror and finally see someone worthy, someone with a heart, someone capable of loving and being loved. That realization terrifies them, because now you're no longer easy to manipulate. You're no longer bowing your head for scraps of validation. You no longer allow anyone to define your identity. When you know your worth, you walk with your head held high. You stop taking responsibility for wounds that aren't yours. You leave relationships that shrink your soul, and you no longer need anyone's permission to be your full self. They fear that, because now you're not an emotional pawn in their game, you've become the player. You're no longer chasing love. You've become love for yourself, and that leaves no space for them. A person who knows their worth cannot be defined by silence, neglect, or deception. And to a narcissist, there's nothing more terrifying than a soul who has escaped the prison of self-doubt. 8. They fear you, exposing the truth about them to others. A narcissist can tolerate you walking away, but what they cannot handle is when you dare to speak the truth. Because throughout the relationship, they weren't just manipulating your emotions, they were manipulating the narrative. They wrote the script, they played the roles, they posed as the victim, and often you were painted as the villain in the story they told others. They don't fear the truth because it's false. They fear it because it's accurate. They fear that you'll start telling what really happened, no exaggeration, no lies, just the raw, honest truth. Because once you speak out, their mask begins to fall. You talk about the gaslighting, the emotional confusion, the invisible scars. You're not doing it out of revenge, you're doing it to protect yourself and maybe even to protect others from falling into the same trap. What terrifies them most is that you're no longer afraid. You're no longer keeping secrets to protect their image. You no longer blame yourself wondering, was I too sensitive? You now know that silence is no longer strength, it's complicity. They fear you posting something online. They fear you telling the truth at a family gathering. They fear you writing a blog, sharing your voice, or simply speaking truth into the open air. Because when you expose them, they lose control, not just over you, but over the public image they've carefully curated. They fear coworkers finding out. They fear new partners hearing the truth. They fear their family seeing behind the mask. They fear the world no longer believing their act. But do you know what's more powerful than calling them out? It's simply living in your truth, unapologetically, fearlessly. That alone is enough to make them fall apart behind closed doors. 9. They fear you no longer react. There's a quiet fear narcissists will never admit your indifference. Not anger, not sadness, not begging or pleading. Just nothing. You used to cry. You used to hurt. You used to explain yourself endlessly, typing long messages just hoping they would understand. And they got used to that. Every emotion you showed reassured them they still had a grip on you. Because to a narcissist, as long as you react, they still exist in your world. But one day you stop reacting. Not because you're weak, but because you're done. You're tired. You've accepted the pattern for what it is. You've stopped expecting different results from the same manipulation. So you go quiet, calm, detached. Not because you're numb, but because you've healed. You no longer need to defend yourself. You no longer need to be seen, understood, or forgiven. All you want now is peace. And that makes them unravel. Because they don't know what's happening. They can't provoke you. They can't pull you back. They can't trigger the old emotional spiral. They start trying everything, sending nostalgic messages, pretending to be remorseful, creating drama hoping you'll jump in, even provoking you just to get a glare and insult anything. But still, you don't react. And that's what they can't bear, being invisible to you. No more power, no more emotional leverage, no more buttons to push. You've stopped playing their game. You've cut off the power supply they depended on. Because what they truly needed was never your love, it was your reaction. Once you become calm, grounded, and unbothered, immune to their chaos, You become someone they can't reach anymore, and that's what terrifies them. You've shut a door they always believed they had a key to. 10. They fear you moving on and never coming back. Deep down, narcissists always believe you'll come back. Not because they think you still love them, but because they believe you can't live without them. They assume that no matter how many times you leave, eventually you'll return because you need them, because you're too weak, because you're addicted to the chaos they created. That's the final pillar in their illusion of control. You always come back. But when you walk away and don't look back, everything collapses. There are no second chances. No, let's talk. No sleepless nights filled with regret. You don't return. Not because you're cold, but because you've woken up. You've seen the cycles, the promises never kept, the apologies never followed by change, the fresh starts that only led to deeper wounds. You no longer choose from emotion, you choose from awareness. And that's what terrifies them most. You move forward without looking back. They no longer hold the power to create emotional turmoil within you. They can no longer steer your choices. They are no longer part of the future you're building. They watch you clean up your life. They watch you heal. They watch you write a new chapter, and they are completely erased from the pages. And their greatest fear is not just losing you, it's losing the reflection of themselves they relied on to feel significant. Without you returning, they are left to face themselves, the emptiness, the truth they were never irreplaceable. When you don't come back, they finally realize that all the power they thought they had was an illusion, fed by your belief and your loyalty. And now, as you walk away, for good, the only thing left for them is powerlessness. Did you notice the common thread running through these 10 fears? They're not proof that you're weak, broken, or unworthy. Quite the opposite. They are undeniable evidence that you are becoming stronger, wiser, and free. Narcissists and flying monkeys don't fear you because you're dangerous. They fear you because you've awakened. They fear you because you know who you are. They fear you because you're no longer dependent. And most of all, they fear that you're building a life where they no longer get to be the star. Every time you stay silent, set a boundary, or walk away without looking back, you're making a bold declaration to the world: I choose me. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need revenge to feel justice. You just need to keep walking with your head held high, with your heart healed, and with a life that has no space left for manipulation. And that is the most powerful response you'll ever give to those who once underestimated you. If any part of this resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a comment, sharing your story, and share this video with someone who may need to hear it. Someone out there might still be living in the dark, not knowing they deserve the light. And you might just be the first light they see.